Good afternoon, good morning. I know some of you guys got to move your clocks back. Arizona does not. We're kind of stubborn that way. So whether it's morning, afternoon for you guys, welcome to my webinar. My name is Birgit Hippel, and today we're going to be talking about that wonderful topic of month-end procedures and getting ready for year end. And hopefully we can make sure that you guys are all set so that when year end comes, everything's in balance and everything is looking great. So thank you for joining my webinar. If at any point you have any questions, please don't hesitate to go ahead and put that in the chat. If you have some really in-depth questions and I can't completely answer your question, I may ask you to email your account manager at support.workamajig.com, and that way they can go through it in much more detail with you if you have some of those really detailed questions. I may not answer your question right away, but I will go ahead at periodic times, stop and look at those questions and see how many of those I can get answered. So if at any point I'm talking too fast, too slow, or this isn't kind of what you were thinking the webinar would be, please just let me know. Happy to kind of look at possible other future webinars that you guys might be interested in if we're not touching on a topic that you currently see in the list coming up. So we're always looking at new topics for webinars. All right, so let's go ahead and let me share my screen. Now, we've got quite a bit to cover. One of the things we're going to start out with is the 1099 setup and printing. I know that's important for some of you guys who don't need to worry about all the month-end, year-end balances and account recs and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and cover that first. And then that way, if you guys, that's the only thing you needed in this topic, you guys can drop off if you want. You're always welcome to stay for the entire topic. Then we're going to get into our month-end procedures and kind of some tips and tricks and making sure that everything is imbalanced along the way so that by the time we get here to year end, we've got everything kind of already covered. And it's not the usual panic that I know that I even tend to go through with year-end processing. So, all right, let's start with 1099. If you happen to go to our support guide, we do have some good articles on 1099 reporting, the setup, the printing of them, even, the IRS instructions. If you happen to do electronic filing, we'll be talking about all of that in this first part here. Okay. So let's go over to our today purchasing and kind of talk first about that vendor setup. So when we go to our vendor list, and of course, I already have my vendor pre-set up with it. But if you come to your vendor record and you go into your purchasing defaults, payment options, this is where you set the fact that they're a 1099, whether it's the NEC, because that's the typical contractor one, it automatically defaults to the box for non-employee compensation. If you're doing either the miss or interest, those options come up with multiple options under miscellaneous. And that's really all that you need to do within that vendor record to make them a 1099 vendor. Okay. Now, within Workamajig, we have the way our vendors work in our payments for 1099s. It's done off of the payment. Okay. So when you're looking at any payments that you've created, it's not the vendor invoice. So you may have 5 vendor invoices out there, but have only paid one of those vendor invoices this year. It is the payment that will be reported on the 1099. Now, within that payment, even though you notice that this is a posted transaction, generally if you want to change anything within a posted transaction, you would need to unpost it. But in a payment, we have a field in here called exclude from 1099, and that's available without even having to unpost. So if, let's say, you've got a payment of $15.75, but 75 of it was not applicable to 1099 reporting. Maybe it's a reimbursement for something that they purchased or something like that. You could put that amount in there Okay. And then the system would specifically exclude that amount from the payment when you do the 1099 reporting. I do see I already have a okay. Heidi's went ahead and said, I believe a new IRS requirement is that e-filing must happen for 10 or more returns. So thank you for that information. I wasn't aware of that. And I think a lot of people are starting to switch automatically more to the e-filing anyways, but thank you for that information. Very helpful. Okay. So the payment is what is determined that's going to be in that 1099 reporting. Okay. Now we have done some changes that are coming up. And one of the things, let me kind of point this out. Under the purchasing reports, here's our the filing that needs to be done. And when you go to, set this up, you're going to be doing this either for this year or last year. If we're coming into January, I'm really going to be running this for this year. The reporting year. So of course, I'm going to be looking at this fiscal year, even though this fiscal year is not exactly done yet. And, but of course, that's what we're going to be looking at the 1st of January doing 2023. So I guess it would be last year. But in order for me to run this right now, I can generate this as a PDF. And as you see from the form, it doesn't show a whole lot. It's because, the form has all of the information on it. Now, the way our forms are situated within, or the format is situated within Workamajig, it is always updated to the latest form that the IRS is asking for. Now, they have just recently made a change for this new form coming up where you actually get to identify the year. So I think it started with 2022, and now you can actually, they're trying not to change the form as much as they used to, which is awesome because it would drive our engineers nuts every year trying to figure out, shift this box over slightly up, down, over. And it went through a lot of testing to get that done. Now they're actually allowing the same form to be used, and then the year is actually being put in there. So when you identify the reporting year, that's going to be pre-filled out on that form in that specific spot. Okay. Now there is the option in here to do the text file, and we'll kind of look at that in a moment. So if I come back to the help guide, you can see, let's see, I think maybe I didn't put it in this one. I've got the wrong one. We do kind of tell you that the forms are available at Staples or any of your typical business office stores, that type of thing. And that's basically, if you're having to print that, you can do that from here. Now, the text file, when you do the text file, and if you are having to set that up, our help guide again gives you the link to the IRS. And so you have to go and preset some information up with the IRS to set up your account. And that information from your account is what gets inputted into here. Okay, so those are fields that are coming from whatever account you've set up with with the IRS. And then they also allow you to do a test file. So if you kind of want to test it out, not really ready yet to file my true 1099, but I want to make sure my file works, I want to make sure that there are no problems, you can actually generate a test file. Now, this does come in a text format. It's not the easiest thing to read. So if you wanted your CPA or something to read it, you may want to consider, sending them the vendor detail report or something. But if you do send that to them in a text file, I know that like on the Mac, the text edit will actually, you can display that text file so you can see the details within that. Okay. One of the things that is coming up in the newest changes, they haven't been released yet. They're going to be coming out in the November update. And I think we might have a few other tweaks that are coming with it in time. There is something in here now called a payment type. So with the way the The IRS is wanting things reported. It's not including credit cards. It's not including, V payments, or if you're using Fast Pay, it's supposed to be that Fast Pay is supposed to report those. And, these V cards are supposed to be reporting those. Credit card companies are going to be reporting the 1099s, and those are no longer to be included in your filing. And that was already, I think, a couple of years ago that started. We do give you the option that if you'd like to run it and include credit cards, maybe you're running it for a previous year or something like that prior to credit card charges being included, where you're paying your vendor with a credit card, then we still give you that option to run it that way. But there is something now called payment type. And so there's all these different options. And I know FastPay's, I let the engineers know that they're kind of changing their name to AvidX, I believe is what it's going to be. And so they're already kind of behind the curve on this one, but they will be updating those. This list is actually controlled by the engineers. So as we have new functions coming in that might not be in this list, we'll need to make sure that we update this. But if you're doing payments through Fast Pay or Coupa, those are going to be handled by those organizations to report those 1099s. So you will be excluding those from your 1099 reporting. Okay. Now, this option to set a payment type is new. Okay. And it's just coming up in the November update. So what's going to happen is that when you have payments from, let's say, this past year or something, and that you've got payments that were done through FastPay or through Coupa or something like that, you'll be able to actually update these payments and set the payment type on them so that the system knows to exclude, oh, this is FastPay, this is Coupa, this is V-Card, and they should be excluded from the 1099 reporting. So they will be having a payment method to them added. And I believe even the vendor listing screen now includes payment type name. So when you look at that, do I have, there we go. I do have some in here already that it's a way for you to be able to mass update and backfill things for this year so that they're going to be reported correctly next year. In the future, when you go and create your print your checks, and let's say you're using ACH and stuff like that, it's automatically going to set the payment type for you for those that are on the print check screen, such as whether you're using, any of these, okay, it's going to set those for you. So this option to mass update is really to be able to backfill for this current year and to be able to set those payment types correctly. Okay. Any questions at all about setting up the vendors as 1099 contractors, being able to update those payments to exclude from 1099s? It's always done in that payment itself, so when you've got here, and that is a field that you can always update even if the transaction is posted or not posted. And then, of course, the reports that you run will automatically read that. You will need to start making sure that you're watching those payment types, that you're just looking at the payments that you're making, as opposed to the payments that V-Card and FastPay and those others are making, and that the system then can generate either a PDF, an Excel, or a text file, depending on whether you're filing electronically or not. Okay. Any questions? All right, perfect. Let's move on now. We have our month-end procedures. So, oops, I do see a question. All right, would love the recording of this webinar to share with my bookkeeper and CPA. I think they would know all about this, but would love for them to see the overview. Sure. The webinars will definitely be posted So when you come to the help guide again, if you don't have the help guide bookmarked, anytime that you're on your own homepage here, you can come to this question mark and pop open the help guide from there. I definitely always suggest just, bookmarking it. I'm in the help guide all the time. If you come to the webinars within a couple days, this webinar here will be posted. We'll post the recording for it, and you'll be able to share that link with them. All right. So let's go ahead and look at month-end procedures. So month-end procedures really has to do with if you do these things monthly, then by the time you get to the year end, there really shouldn't be much for you to do because you've been balancing along the way, and it's a lot less headache, of course, to figure out what those issues are if you're staying on top of it monthly. So one of the things I wanted to do besides take you through the month-end procedures was kind of just give you some tips and tricks that I have of navigating through the system and some of the shortcuts I like to do, and making sure that you guys are aware of some of those different things that you can do within the system. So we are going to be going through this month-end process, be kind of running through all of these items within here. And as you notice, there's not a lot. At number 10, we set the closing date. So not a lot to do each month if you stay on top of this. So if we come over to the accounting page, Today Accounting, that's this section right here. Now, there are things in here that you might be seeing, you might not be seeing, and it might have to do with the system settings. So again, with the system settings, if you guys are not doing anything like work in progress and you don't see that on your screen, or you think I don't do work in progress and I don't want to see that on my screen, then you can always uncheck that box and it will hide the work in progress. Okay. Now, this to me kind of speaks volumes, and I've even asked the engineers, I'm hoping that we're going to get that within this next year. I'd like to add a couple more balanced accounts on here that will automatically tell you whether you were balanced or not. So I'll kind of talk to you about those enhancements I'd like to see within the system coming up that at least I've requested and asked for. We'll see if they get approved or not. But we start with the unapproved transactions. Now, of course, the unapproved transactions might have current things in it, and that's fine. You've got current client invoices, current, vendor invoices or payments that are needing to be approved, and they've not yet been approved, and that's fine. You wouldn't expect this to always be zero or nothing in here. But you do want to make sure that if you're getting ready to close a specific month, that all of your checks have been printed and posted, or at least marked as ACH and posted. All of your vendor invoices are in, client invoices, journal entries are posted. You want to make sure everything is in that needs to be approved, gets approved at this point. Now, you cannot mass approve from this page. You can, if you have the right, come in and actually, approve something or well, these are payments. So let me come down to this vendor invoice. This vendor invoice has yet to be approved. If I have the right to approve it, I can just click it open and go from here. If you notice that the checks are still showing up in here, even though it's not a true approval process, it's still trying to let you know you didn't finish this process and you didn't even get to the point where you can post the payment because it doesn't even have a check number yet. So you either need to manually put that check number in, or you need to go and, run it through the print check screen and either mark as ACH or print the check in order to get it off of this unapproved transaction screen. If you notice too, you also have dates in here. So you can specifically say, hey, I don't want to see anything current because, I might have a long list of things and they just ran client invoices and I don't need to see the client invoices for November yet because we're just now starting to work in that. So you can set dates where you can look just up to a specific period, and that way you're kind of ignoring the things that are in the current period. This toggle right here lets you, if you want to go to specific categories or only see those specific ones. I tend to like to see them all, just because even if maybe they're not my domain that I'm to be taken care of, I can kind of keep an eye on things and make sure, hey, how come, these checks haven't been printed? They've been sitting here for a while. And maybe I can go and chase those down so that I can make sure still, again, that my month-end procedures are getting completed. Okay. Unposted transactions. This is the one that can cause havoc with your AR and AP being out of balance. You might have the client invoices not posted, but the receipt has already been posted. That'll cause your AR account to be out of balance, and suddenly this will not say balanced here, it'll say check date. So you always want to make sure that you've again reviewed all of your items that have not yet been posted. And even if you're going to post them today, which you can select them all and post at one time, that's kind of called batch posting, it's actually going to go based on the posting date that is in the transaction. So it is not posting as of today. You were just performing the function today. It's actually posting as of the posting date of that transaction. Okay. There is a print report. So a lot of people may say, well, I didn't create these client invoices and vendor invoices and all the payments, but I'd like to review them and where they're going to be posted. And instead of opening each one up and then, trying to figure out, is this correct or not, you can click on pre-posting. Now, I tend to like to look at it pre-posting by transaction, because if I see a client invoice, I know it should be AR account and then an income account, or, whatever we've got it posting to. Same thing with my vendor invoice. I should be able to see AP account and then the expense account or COGS account that it's going to. You can do pre-posting by account. Show me everything that's going to hit AR, show me everything that's going to hit AP, show me everything that's going to hit income. I have a harder time reading that report that way, but it just depends on how you'd like to see it. So if you do pre-posting by transaction, you would see each individual transaction in here. So here's that vendor invoice. It's going to be hitting accounts payable, and then these two cost of goods sold account. I can understand that easier than if I looked at it by, pre-posting by account, because then it just kind of lumps everything together. Here's payments, and then I come down and accounts receivables. And so I have a harder time reading this one, but we do offer both. And it's a great way to kind of spot check things before you go ahead and select all and post. Okay, I know we have a couple of questions in here. Where was the switch to remove the post work in progress? Sorry if I went through that too quickly. I will go ahead and show you that. And if you have a posting date on a client invoice that is prior to when you've set the GL close date, will it just not post at all? Correct. So let me go ahead and answer both of those questions. So if I come back here under the More button, there is a system settings. So system settings kind of controls what you're seeing on this page. Okay, so if I come over to system settings, and of course, as a company-wide default, no, not a lot of people all have access to the Today Accounting page. You have to first be able to get to the Today Accounting page. And then for those who can get to the Today Accounting page, if I uncheck post work in progress, then it hides it from view. So if I go ahead and click that and save, and now it's gone. So if I bring it back, because I actually do post work in progress, that'll be visible on my screen. And you have that for a lot of your pages. Like, another handy one is Today Billing. There are people who don't use billing worksheets at all. You can actually hide that. So again, if you go to system settings, here's the billing worksheets. If you don't do billing worksheets at all, you can hide those and uncheck those, and this whole entire section won't display. Okay. And then of course, how are you billing any of your projects if you're doing mass billing? Okay. And if you have, the question was about the GL close date, and we'll definitely be talking about that in more detail. When you set that GL close date, if you're trying to post something prior to the GL close date, so let's say you've got this set for, October 31st, and I'm trying to post something in my unposted transactions that's going to go back to August, it's not going to post. It's going to tell you that it's going to give you the error message and say, you have to reset your GL close date. So we'll go ahead and kind of talk about that a little bit more as we go further on about setting this date and how you use those dates. Okay. Did that answer both of the questions that you guys had? And two, I know sometimes some of the errors that I see on unposted transactions is, let's say you have something on a client invoice and you're missing a sales account. Okay. And sales account is required, or let's say you've got some specific, you're doing a time and materials invoice. I don't know if I have one in here. Let's see. That one's not. So if this item here, this food and beverage item in my expense items doesn't have a sales GL account, then the system's going to go ahead and give me an error, and it's going to say you're missing a sales GL account. So let's say, for example, I come into purchasing expense report items, food and beverage. If I happen to remove this sales account here, okay, and I come over to this one and I try to post this one, it's going to say the transaction failed. And it says basically you selected to post sales using detail and not all details are set up. Basically what that's really saying when you get that error message is that one of the items that you've got in here, and lots of times there's multiple items within here, one of these items, this item, does not have a sales account. Yet in this invoice, you told the system, hey, post using the details of my items. Whatever my item is pointing to, I want that item pointing to the correct sales account. That's what this says to do. So it says you're billing food and beverage. Go look at my food and beverage item. That item doesn't have a sales account, and now suddenly the system doesn't know where to post that to. So if I were to run the pre-posting report, pre-posting by transaction, you would see in here, and where is it? Because it would tell you, I forgot which invoice number it was, 107, sorry. Uh, 105, 106. And, okay, where's 107? 107, right here. Missing GL account will not post. So it even tells you on the pre-posting report that, hey, there's an item in here, this food and beverage item. It tells you exactly which item it is. So when you go back to your system setup and purchasing expense report items, and I bring this back in, and I bring this to a specific sales account. Now, when I'm billing this account, it says I know which sales account to go to, and it will no longer fail and post. All right. All right. Does that make sense about the errors that you can receive? And even your pre-printing report will also show you if there are going to be any errors up front before you even just select. And then, of course, each line will tell you exactly what the error was. All right. So you always want to make sure that this is kind of cleaned up to the end of the month, because of course everything in your reporting, all your financial reports, are based on things that are posted only. Okay. On the month-end procedures, so basically we've done the post transactions. We want to run our WIP if you are posting work in progress. Now, Majority of my clients do not post work in progress. I have some that are very dedicated about it, and they do post work in progress. And basically, work in progress is being able to see the unbilled transactions and having them be able to report the unearned revenue basically from those, and then also to be able to normalize your revenue and your expenses within the same period. So if I have an expense back in February and I bill the, and I've got a COGS expense back in February, but I don't get to bill my client until, March. Now I have expenses in February and I have revenue in March. This actually allows you to have the expense and the revenue in the same month. And that's basically what posting work in progress does. If you are interested in work in progress, you can definitely reach out to your account manager. There is a great I don't know if there's any webinars for posting work in progress. That's usually kind of a one-on-one discussion, but there is a help guard article called Posting Work in Progress, and it is quite detailed about setting it up and what it does and how it works. Okay, what would post in, what would not post in. Now, for me, I have posted some work in progress already, and do know, and for those of you who that actually post work in progress, you know that this kind of locks your transactions down again. You can't just easily go in and always just unpost something, fix something, and repost something. This is kind of like a secondary step that kind of locks those transactions down. So do be aware that there is kind of a learning curve about being able to wait. I can't just unpost that and fix it. No, lots of times you might have to unpost your WIP, then unpost the transaction, fix the transaction, repost the transaction, then repost WIP. So it does go through a process. Now, before I go ahead and show you this work in progress, one of the things I wanted to show you was down here on your accounting page, there is a WIP analysis report. And now this WIP analysis report, so if I were to run this as of the end of the month and I go ahead and generate this, what this does is it shows you under the account summary, this is what is still unposted. This is what's available to be posted. This is what is currently posted in your work in progress. Okay. And we also show you the breakdown based on project of how those transactions break out. Okay, so you can always come in and look at this and see, oh, how come we haven't billed for this time? Or how come we haven't marked, these are kind of old transactions and they should have been marked as billed or billed by now. And so it's a chance to kind of review what's in there, but also to give you kind of an idea of what's going to be posting into work or what's available to post to work in progress. When you do the work in progress, you can also do a pre-posting report. So if I were to run this as of the end of October, I can say, give me a pre-posting report. That way I have a chance to review the transactions, make sure that there's not something that I need to update or change, or how come these haven't been billed? Let me make sure, because you want to make sure that all of your billing processes are done before you post work in process, because of course, if it hasn't been billed, it gets posted into work in progress. Once it's been billed, it comes out of work in progress because it's now not that unearned revenue. So you just want to make sure that you have that chance to kind of review this, make sure that there's not really something old that, once again, you might have to talk to your billing people and find out why that hasn't been billed and what's going on with those. And then you can go ahead and post your work in progress. Okay, and it's just a simple, you have to put a posting comment. So most people usually put the month that they're posting and post the comment and hit post. Okay, you can always see what is currently in those work in progress reports. So you can see, labor that get billed, vendor invoices that came in, as well as, anything else that's going on within those reports. Okay. Any questions? I know work in progress, that was kind of quick for work in progress, but for those who do work in progress, you just want to make sure that you've got your billing already done. You've got your vendor invoices in and posted so that they can come in appropriately into your work in progress reports. Okay. For those of you that don't do work in progress, life is much easier when you don't, but I understand why some of my clients would like to do that. Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and skip this open account reconciliation for a moment. I'm going to come back to that one when we start talking about our AR and our AP. So this, of course, when you click on this, becomes my AR aging report. And the fact that I have a date here and it says balance means that when I run the client invoices, okay, my AR aging, let's say as of the end of October, and I'm looking at client invoices and I generate this on the screen, I've got 13,697, not a whole lot to live off of, but there's my my open AR. If you're running this against your balance sheet, so if I come in and run my balance sheet as of the same date, what the system is saying is that your accounts receivable account on your balance sheet should match the invoices that are sitting on your AR account. If those two match, and in the old days, you actually had to run the AR aging report for client invoices, then you ran your balance sheet for the same date and you made sure that those two accounts match. Now what we do on the Today Accounting page is we actually already tell you, we know that you're balanced as of today. If you're not balanced, you're not going to see, you're just going to see AR aging, and you're going to see something in blue that says check date. And that basically is saying, I will run this for you and I will help you figure out the last time those two matched. Your accounts receivable account matched to the client invoices that you have open. So you know, this is something that anytime you come into your accounting page and these match and these show a date, you're golden. You don't have to do that running the balance sheet to make sure that they match. However, if you ever do have a check date here, you can click on that, just like when you click on find date of last balance. You have to pick your account and you can find that date of last balance, and it will actually tell you the last time you were balanced. So if it were to say, you know, October 15th is the last day you were in balance, that means that you did something on October 16th that took you out of balance. If you do have an out of balance problem, we have a help guide article, and I think it's called Out of Balance. Let's see, troubleshooting out of balance. So that kind of just takes you through those beginning steps of how do you compare, how do you even figure out the date, what are some of the things that you should look at, and it does it for both AP, aging, AR, advanced bill, and I don't have the pre-bill in here yet. That's one I still need to add, but you can look at this and basically it's telling you the same thing. Run the AR aging as of a certain date. You know, if you went out of balance on one date, you run it for the next day. Then you run your balance sheet for that same exact date. You find the difference in the amount, and more than likely you'll find either an invoice or a receipt, usually for that amount, might be multiple invoices, that something is wrong with it. Maybe the invoice isn't posted and the receipt is, so it's coming out of accounts receivable and not going into accounts receivable in the first place, causes an out of balance. Okay. Let's see. For the AR and AP balancing, does that work with multi-currency accounts? Yes. So it is doing the exact same thing. So if you have multi-currency accounts, and I don't have them set up on this account, I do on my regular account, it's going to do the same thing. You will have a currency field here. You're going to be matching to your correct account receivable, and it will look. So anytime, in fact, I know many of you guys don't have multi-currency on, but, so here's my regular account. So I have a currency field. So if I'm looking at my Canadian dollar account and I'm looking at my Canadian accounts receivable account, it is actually going and looking at the balance. So if I were to generate this, it actually shows you the value in USD. So this might be the Canadian value, but this is the amount that would show up on my balance sheet and this needs to match to my balance sheet account. Okay. All right. Now, for those of you who have an allowance for doubtful account, an allowance for doubtful account is never going to be in balance. There are never client invoices and an accounts receivable account, and they're never going to match. You have an option that if you do want to call it an accounts receivable account, because some people will switch it and call it an asset account or something and not actually label it an accounts receivable account. The allowance for doubtful account in your admin system setup in your GL accounts. So when I come to my allowance for doubtful account, if I wanted to keep it as an accounts receivable account, I can tell it to exclude from that calculation. Am I in balance or not? Don't even bother looking at this account. So then it will only look at my true accounts receivable account and ignore this because this one's generally always just journal entries. Okay. Okay, so it's inside the report. Yes. Yes, you need to make sure that you choose the correct currency and then the correct AR account with it. And you can click on the, so when I come in here again, you want to make sure you choose your correct currency and the correct AR account that matches with it. And then you can even click on find date of last balance and it will tell you whether, so if you have something here that says check date and you have, like me, lots of different AR accounts, you have to figure out which one is the one that's out of balance. And so say, okay, my Canadian account is currently in balance. Is my Mexican account currently in balance? And I can check each one individually to see which one is out of balance. Okay. Any questions about using that allowance for doubtful account if you guys have those, and how to get it to not be looked at when it's doing this calculation? All right. Now, always be aware that your AR aging report is 3 reports in one. Now, this balance one here is looking at accounts receivable. It's going to the balance sheet. And of course, now I've lost my balance sheet on here. So, oops, my views, my balance sheet. When I run my balance sheet as of 10/31 and I'm looking at this, I'm looking at accounts receivable, the system is automatically doing that, looking at accounts receivable and telling me it's balanced. Unapplied advance bill invoices. If I do advance bill invoices, this is not whether the client is paying you the invoice or not. This is how much is still sitting in that advance bill accrual account, that liability account that has not yet been applied to a revenue invoice. So if I generate this invoice or this, I've got 41,000. So when you look at some of these advance bills, it's an advance bill account or invoice, okay? And the client has paid it. That's not why it's showing up on the AR aging. It's showing up on the unapplied because I still have 66, 65 still waiting to be applied to a future revenue invoice. And that's what you see right here. I guess maybe there's taxes, or maybe it's rounding up. That's kind of odd. Oh, I might have something not posted. So there's that posting thing. But that's what this is. Now, this amount here, again, looking at my balance sheet, okay, and make sure I ran my AR aging. Oops, I didn't run my AR aging as of 10/31. Make sure those dates match. So my AR aging, or my unapplied advance bills, is 37,750. When I look at the balance sheet and I come down to my advance bill accrual account, those two should match. This basically says this is what's in that liability account. Here are the invoices that back up what's in that liability account. If these two don't match, there's going to be an out of balance. Now, this advance bill accrual account, that's what I'm wanting to add to the Today Accounting page, to let that be also, are you balanced, are you not, without even running that, so it's a visual thing. That's something I've been asking for. And then, of course, we have the unapplied receipts. So if you enter a receipt and you don't apply it to an invoice or to a sales account, it's going to go into your unapplied account. And so when you generate that on the screen, and I don't have anything in there, that would actually apply to your ballot or to your unapplied account, which I don't, so this one might be payments, because I used the same unapplied account for both receipts and payments, and that needs to match. Yep, so it's a payment in there. All right. Any questions about how the AR aging is actually 3 reports? If you're comparing any of these 3 reports against the balance sheet, you always want to make sure that you're looking at posted transactions only, because of course the only thing showing up on the balance sheet is a posted transaction, which then brings you kind of back to, what if you have some things unposted? You might want to you might be missing those. So these all kind of play hand in hand together to make sure that they're working correctly. Okay. AP aging works exact same way. I have, a single AP account here. It does say it's balanced. It's basically doing the same thing where it's looking at the balance sheet and saying the invoices that are in there that are applied. And I do have where I can include the unapplied payments. And when you look at that on the screen, you will see that it's actually a payment type here, as opposed to these are actually my payables. So I have a payment that has not yet been applied to a vendor invoice, and that will show up as a prepayment. Okay. Any questions so far with the aging reports at all? All right. One of the things I like to point out is the account balances here. Once again, if you're looking at system settings, our default when you first open up your account, and many of you guys have been here for a very long time, but the account balances. This is what controls what you see. So if you're not seeing your credit cards or your liability accounts or your AP accounts in here, this is what's controlling it. So you have the right to say, what do you want to see within this account balances view? Okay. I also like to note that, this account balance, you can change this and say, well, what was this as of 10/31? And all of these numbers will update. Okay, so this does control the balances that you see here. Okay, if I'm opening up any of these and I come into, let's say, accounts receivable, it will automatically show you the current month period. And we did that so that when you open this up, and if you've been in our system for 10 years, you don't have this, we used to have where, boy, you'd open it up and it just kept churning as it was bringing in history after history, year after year. And then we really decided that people really just want to see kind of what currently is happening. So when you open up any of these accounts here, it's automatically going to show you for the current month period, which there's not much to the month yet, but you can come over here to the filter and say, well, I'd like to, look at it for last month or this month, or I'd like to look a little bit more than that. You can also come in here. So if you were, let's say, looking at your bank account, if I come into the checking account and I go ahead and search, let me kind of bring a little bit more into here because I don't have a lot in this account. Well, that's not much either. Let's see this fiscal year. See if that brings in. Okay, there we go. So you notice you have these different types. If you're running and looking for something very specific in a checking account or something like that, in the filters option right here, you can say, well, I just want to see all the payments that happened during that period, and it will filter those out. So it's kind of a nice way, if you're searching for something specific, to use this to jump to different accounts, maybe limit what you're seeing within that view, and then of course be able to control that date range. Okay. All right. Is there a report that shows the payment received on advanced billed invoices? I mean, you do have any of your it would be like any other client invoice, whether it's an advance bill invoice or a revenue invoice. You've got the date paid on that. So, you know, let me close this. Any of your views. I think the client invoices where you can, you know, look at all invoices. Let's see, I believe that there's a date paid, posting date, invoice. Nope. So you would have to run a custom report for that. But there are some great custom reports that we could create or help you create. A lot of people like to see, you know, what invoices are applied to the different advance bill invoices because sometimes they're very large. So there's some very great reports that we could do out there for you. Okay. All right. Moving along, if in our month-end procedures, so we posted WIP, we ran our balance sheet, of course you want to be able to run your corporate P&L. So, you know, as you come down to your financial reports down here, you can run your corporate P&L. We've got some different options here. We've even got budget comparisons. So if you create a budget for each year, you can do those budget comparisons. How do you want to run the report? You know, if you've got departments set up, I want one report per department, or I just want it all as one report. So there's some different options that you can do within here. We also have, I know a lot of people will run the client P&L multi-view and the project P&L multi-view. Now for those, if you do run those reports quite a bit, I also suggest running the overhead allocations details report. Basically, the overhead allocations details report will say, let me see if I have much in here. It's a way to look at anything that is an expense coming in that is not posted to a client or a project. So if you've got a vendor invoice in for the rent, for the phone bill, etc., those are all overhead expenses. But sometimes you've got some expenses that come in that, you know, are a COGS expense. Well, and if there's no client or project to it, it's going to be considered an overhead expense. And these accounts here go into the calculation for when you run, let's say, the client P&L, and you're allocating that overhead. It's going to take the information from these overhead allocation details report and then spread it evenly based on how you're asking the system to allocate. And for example, if we, let's see if I did this fiscal year right. So if I run this report on the screen, there is the COGS account right here. Now this COGS field right here is really a total of two fields, allocated COGS and direct COGS. So what I always like to do is anytime you have a field that's a total of two fields, I like to bring the individual fields in. So, and if you notice too, that this one has no underline. Like I can click on this revenue because it's the client invoices and I can see all of the invoices. But this one on COGS, because it's two different fields, it doesn't have that drill down capability. So if I go in and modify and I say, okay, I want allocated COGS and also direct COGS, those two fields actually equal the COGS amount. But when I do that, and let's refresh, now I have drill down capability to see what's happened. So within this one, it's basically saying, hey, of those overhead allocation details, those overhead expenses, I'm allocating of that $200, $71 to this client. And if you ever click on it, you see how the calculation is. So that overhead allocation for COGS expenses on that report was $200. It says for total hours we had for that whole fiscal year was 47 and a half hours, but this client used 17 of those hours. So they're getting 35, almost 36% of this amount which turns out to be $71.58. So that's allocating the overhead and spreading the costs of that overhead to your various clients based on whether you're doing it by hours or some different avenues. Now, there are some great help guide articles on overhead allocation details. So if you want to read up more about that or have any other questions about it, you can also reach out to your account manager who can go through that with you. But anytime that you're ever looking through your client P&L or project P&L and you see that it's two different fields, then bring the individual two different fields in, because the total of these two equals this. Okay, and then it becomes easier to drill down and say, okay, well, here's where the expenses were, etc. All right. Let's see, any other questions? All right. So month-end procedures, we've run the balance sheet, the corporate P&L, the aging reports, running the accrued order detail report. Now this one's the same way as like the advance bill invoices. So once again, if you're on the Today Accounting page, this is if you pre-bill your orders. Okay, so you have purchase orders, insertion, broadcast orders. You pre-bill them out to the client. If I run this as of 10/31 and I run this report, this says these are the orders that I have pre-billed to the client. This is still what is sitting in my accrual account. And I have two different accrual accounts, and the total of these, this is actually the balance sheet. So if I were to run the balance sheet and for that same exact date, this is the balance in those accounts, where the total of these two matches this. I am still in balance. So when you have an issue in this, that means you've either not closed an order correctly, or you possibly put a journal entry in, something, but you're once again out of balance. This is another account I would love to have right up here under my balances to say, hey, if you're pre-billing orders, you need to always make sure that this is balanced every month. Okay. All right. Account recs. So if we scroll on back up to what I ignored before, was this open account rec. Now for me, this is kind of just one of those shortcuts I like. If I happen to have started an account rec and I have it already open, I can pop that open from here, and I can even go back and show completed recs. I don't have to scroll on down and then start to search. I can actually, kind of toggle from here. So if I have an account rec that's open, it's an easy way for me to get to those. Now, if I create a new account rec, and actually let me delete this one. So if I create a new account rec, okay, and I come in and I say my bank account, now the system will come up with the starting balance. It is not always necessarily the ending balance of your last account if you've made changes somewhere into the past that's affected your balance. So just be aware that this is not just an automatic ending balance from last month. It is actually based on a calculation. If this starting balance is different than your ending balance from last month, do not just automatically change it to match. There's a reason the system came up with a calculation that's different, and we need to find out why there's now a difference. Okay, so it doesn't just assume it's the ending balance, it's more based on a calculation. And if somebody went back into the past and made some changes that's now affected that starting balance, that's going to show up in here because it does it based on a calculation. If you do have any questions about why suddenly it's different, reach out to support and your account manager will be able to help you identify what that is. If I put in, the 3909.38, because I know I only have one transaction in there, and I go ahead and select that. What you want to make sure when you're doing your account recs is not only, of course, that your statement balance is the same, it's, zero, but that your book balance and ledger balance match. Okay. Book balance is saying, I'm taking your beginning balances, your increases, your decreases, and making sure your statement difference is zero, and that's how it's coming up with this number. The ledger balance is saying, I'm going out to your balance sheet as of this date, and I'm going to go and pull the balance based on all the transactions that you have in there, and I'm going to use that date. What I see sometimes is people will pull in transactions that are past their September date, and they'll clear, let's say, an October 1st, October 2nd transaction in there. So the book balance matches what, the bank says. However, their ledger balance is different because the ledger is saying, I only went up through September 30th. However, you pulled in transactions that went past that date. So you always want to make sure that these two are also matching, besides the fact that your statement difference is there. Okay. All right. And I think the last thing we have is to set that closing date. If you do have multiple GL companies, we tried to make it easy here for you to put the GL close date up here. So you can, if you had multiple companies and you could set your different dates, this is actually a to date rather than a through date. So if I'm ready to close up October, I would set this as November 1st. That means everything up to November 1st cannot be edited or changed, or you cannot post prior to November 1st, but anything from November 1st forward is still, I can unpost and post within the system. Okay. Some people will just do this once a year. Some people will do this quarterly. It is something that we call it a soft close, meaning you can change it if you have to go back and unpost something, but at least you're aware that you cannot close or you cannot post something prior to that date. All right. I know we're right at the 11 o'clock mark. I didn't leave much time for any additional questions. If somebody does have a quick question, I'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, you can always reach out to your account managers if you do have any questions or would like to go through any of these additional reports or some of the things that I had talked about. This was really about making sure that your month-end procedures are done, because when you get to the end and you get to year end, if you've done this every month, there's nothing additional to do. All right. Any last minute questions? Anything I could help with? If not, I do appreciate your time. I know, cut it right there at the hour mark. And I really appreciate you being part of this